YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back. And here we are, May 28th. Jadeveon Clowney, still a free agent. Absolutely wild. Like a high profile pass rusher. One of the more important things in football in today's game. Still a free agent. And recent news comes out that the Browns actually made him a pretty generous offer. We don't know the price. But it was one of the higher paid pass rushers in football, perhaps, and he denied it. So it's believable, but it's kind of wild because, pairing him with Myles Garrett definitely could have been appealing, but it kind of tells me that Jadeveon Clowney does indeed want more of a contender. He wanted a certain amount of money, closer to $20 million per year, and a contender at the same time, and that's why we all knew that was the reason he's still sitting around, is because he wants two things that really don't come together. So very rarely do they happen. So here we are. We're going to talk about my favorite landing spots for him. We can take the Browns out of the picture. I thought that was a wild card team. And we're going to break down why he could go to these teams that I thought of and maybe why they wouldn't sign him or he wouldn't go there. We'll break that down in just a second here. But first, really appreciate the support. We had 50K on this channel, trying to match that on the second channel. More content coming out to the future. Maybe non-NFL content as well. So anything kind of extra will be thrown on that channel. So please subscribe to both. We're on to our next goal. Let's see where we can get to next. The grind continues. Can't wait for the NFL season. Follow that Twitter. We got a lot of polls in NFL talk going on that Twitter. You guys are voting for who wins each division, who gets what seed, who makes the playoffs, who wins each round of the playoffs, who wins the Super Bowl. That is going on now. We're not quite finished, not really close to finishing. You guys vote, and that will create a future video. So a lot of fun. And then the podcast is a newer thing too here at the Goat House. So we're expanding, we're growing here, and I'm really appreciating your guys' awesome support. Any link that you need for any of those things down in the description and the comments. So we can remove the Browns. Like I said, we can remove the Browns. Let's talk about the Seahawks first. I have four, contenders for Jadeveon Clowney. We've seen some wild card teams sign guys, mainly quarterbacks that we didn't expect. So maybe there's some wild card teams out there. But the Seahawks, why could he go back to the Seahawks? Well, what made sense to me all of a sudden was after the draft, they started to cut a couple guys, Fluker, Britt, guys like that, cleared some space. So that could mean maybe they're pushing to get Clowney back. Maybe they didn't get the pass rusher they really wanted in the draft. They know he's familiar with the defense. They traded for him a year ago. They are a Super Bowl contender, and that kind of helps Clowney's vision. He wants to go to a contender. He denied the Browns, even though they probably made him the highest offer. And they're a pretty good team, keep in mind. They could be a good team. Whether you think so or not, they could be. They have a chance to be. So he denied that, but you got a Super Bowl contender here. You would have to believe the Seahawks. He has to believe the Seahawks are a Super Bowl contender. They got a little beat up last year, and that kind of stopped them short, and they were still a very good team. Down the stretch of the season there. It's a giant need, so that's a reason for the Seahawks. They did draft some guys. We'll talk about that in a second, but it's still a giant need. You need a big-time pass rusher. I think it's close to being as important as quarterback. So I think you need a big-time pass rusher. And we talk, he's familiar with their defense. They're familiar with him. Recently made those cuts. Why maybe it won't happen? They have $16 million in cap space, which is pretty good for them. For a contender to have $16 million, pretty good. They can make it happen. Perhaps they could be in the negative. They could be out of space. Maybe it's not the Seahawks. Maybe it's not kind of their plan to kind of be out of cap space. They did draft pass rush. To talk about, even though they drafted pass rush, they got a couple guys. I like Darrell Taylor for this season. L.J. Collier, they drafted him last year. Even though I didn't really grade him as a pass rusher, I viewed him as more of a 3-4 end or a 4-3 playing a 3 technique. So you can't rule out them putting him at pass rusher and believing in him since they took him in the first round last year, or moving him inside. I think they keep him on the edge there. So maybe they believe in the young talent, I guess. They've added some more pieces. They even added Alton Robinson, who's actually pretty solid from Syracuse. So they have pass rushers. Maybe it's not a huge impact group of pass rushers quite yet, but they have it. It feels like the Seahawks tend to avoid, overspending, especially on risky moves. It's why they're always kind of trading for these pieces. They have 1-year deal. Their value has gone down because of that. They don't have to worry about spending the big money. Let's see if it works out. If it's an obvious yes, it's working out, then we're going to spend the money. Clowney, very good pass rusher, better than the sack rate shows, the sack numbers I should say, shows, because he was double a lot, he gets constant pressure, he makes big-time plays and big-time moments, I believe. Dominant in the run game, absolutely dominant. Really can fit any, you put him in the hand in the dirt on the line, you play him off a little bit, he can do anything. But yeah, that could be why the Seahawks kind of don't do it. I probably wouldn't have put them on this list if they didn't make those cuts. That was, just came after the draft, not too long ago. That kind of makes it interesting. So that's an option. After I go through these options, I will make my choice. Then we got the Tennessee Titans. He's been linked to the Titans for quite some time. I actually linked them to him too. That was my prediction at one point. Or as soon as free agency opened, since like I think it was day one of free agency open, my pick was the Tennessee Titans for Jadeveon Clowney, and I figured he would have signed by now to the Tennessee Titans. Once again, kind of familiar with the defense. Even though he didn't play for the Titans, he played under Vrabel. Vrabel was with the Houston Texans. He can fit that defense. Really, I think he can fit any defense. I think the Titans are a Super Bowl contender, maybe not as much of a contender as the Seahawks in most people's minds. A complete team, a growing team, a very good team. Yeah, much improved recently in terms of the beginning of last year to the end. I think it's a pretty big need. You look at that Chiefs Super Bowl game, people blame, AFC Championship game, people blame, one step away from the Super Bowl. It's crazy. The Titans are one step away from the Super Bowl, and then some thought they can pull that off too. But you look at what to blame on that game. To me, they just did not get enough pass rush. I've never seen a title game, two AFC teams left. That lack of pass rush was ridiculous, honestly. I like Harold Landry. I thought that was an absolute steal. He's going to be a heck of a pass rusher. He had a heck of a year last year. There was non-existent pass rush in that game. Absolutely did not exist. It was pretty pathetic, honestly. It's sad. The rest of the defense is really good. They got some good inside linebackers. They did add Vic Beasley, though. We'll talk about that in a second. So it is a pretty big need, much like the Seahawks, even though it's probably, I think it's their pass rush is probably better than the Seahawks. Harold Landry getting better. And then, they added Vic Beasley again. We'll talk about that. They've been linked to each other. Titans, Clowney, Vrabel, Clowney, Titans. It's been linked. They didn't draft a pass rusher. So if you see on the graphic PR, I had to abbreviate it. Stands for pass rusher. And they didn't draft one, which you thought they would probably draft one because they're not really sure if they're going to get Clowney yet, and they definitely could use one. They signed Vic Beasley to a 1-year deal. They don't really have much else. You think they would kind of get insurance, I guess, draft one. They didn't do that. They kind of focused elsewhere when they didn't have a bunch of giant needs, one of those teams, Maybe why it won't happen, maybe they believe for this year in Harold Landry and Vic Beasley, kind of want to try it out, see if they want a long-term extension for Vic Beasley. They did draft Walker out of Georgia last year. I like that pick. We didn't get to see him at all last year, so maybe they believe in guys like that. They're going to provide a lot of pass rush from their inside linebacker unit, which is a very good one, not just the starters in Jayon Brown, Rashaan Evans. David Long is a good rotation guy, so maybe they want to play with more of the inside guys. They're kind of like what succeeded last year for them. It just kind of succeeded up into the point of the Chiefs. It didn't work in that game. They spent big money on Tannehill, and they're kind of focusing on to spend money on Henry, so maybe that's kind of just too much risky spending there on Tannehill, which he's had okay years, and he's had injuries, and he's had one good 75% of the year, maybe a little less for the Titans, so nothing's guaranteed. It's risky. Whether you believe in Tannehill or not, it's risky for multiple reasons. I'm kind of towards the believer side, but it's still very risky. Spending, the franchise tag money is even pricey, I suppose. And then focusing on Derrick Henry, if that's what they choose to do. Anytime you focus on a running back in that way, it's definitely risky. Even if you think he's the best in football, definitely top 5, in my opinion, was the best last year, it's still very risky. So Clowney is still considered, even though I think he's really good, somewhat of a risky signing because he wants more than maybe his value. How many years do you sign him for? He's had the injuries pop up, nothing major, but they popped up. Hasn't got the sack numbers, but to me, he's proven that he can play at a pretty high level, and I still think he has upside with the right team here. So those are the reasons why it wouldn't happen. The next team would be the Philadelphia Eagles. Surprisingly, have $25 million in cap space, so a good amount of money. He's not going to cost $25 million, so they could make that move. The Eagles coaching staff, maybe the front office, hasn't really been a team that be afraid to not only get better but just go out there and just do something, that maybe isn't by, the book or wasn't expected to do. We've seen them draft Jalen Hurts, so they're not afraid to go there, really. They're not afraid to get better at any time, in my opinion. So that's why, I think a lot of teams, that's why it's ridiculous. A talented guy like Clowney, and there's teams out there like, do we really need him? If you're asking yourself that, then you do, in my opinion. Yeah, you don't go out and spend too much money. You don't spend a crazy amount of years signing him, a lengthy contract, I should say. But I just can't stand when teams just are hesitant to go get better. I don't think the Eagles are one of those teams. I think they would be interested in going and do that. I think they're a contender, maybe not as much as the Seahawks, maybe right there with the Titans. You can argue that. But I think if you add a guy like Clowney, I think it makes most teams, but I think that makes them that much better. They add a guy like Hargrave. That's another example of not being afraid to get better. They have Fletcher Cox, they have Malik Jackson. Fletcher Cox can pretty much play any role down there in the interior defensive line. They have other options as well, and they go get a guy because this is gonna make them better. A guy that can play nose tackle. So they're not afraid to get better, and kind of adding with that group of D linemen with Brandon Graham, and I like Derek Barnett. I'm a believer, and I was very high on him out of Tennessee. I think he's getting better and better. It's just not standing out a whole bunch, but you do get better with Clowney at the end of the day. And I think they're that much better with them. Why that won't happen? Yeah, they may believe in Graham and Barnett, which isn't. I wouldn't question them really. I wouldn't really question them because Graham's been proven. Brandon Graham's been proven, obviously, but he is aging. He's not as good as he was the Super Bowl year, even though the numbers are pretty similar. He's just really not as good, but still very good. Derek Barnett, I just talked about. I believe in him. I was very high on him in Tennessee. I like him a lot. Looks like he stepped up last year. Can continue to step up. This could only be one more year in Philadelphia for him before they have to pay big, so that could kind of provide a reason to get Clowney as well. They even though that's kind of surprising, a good team that has some big weird contracts out there, has $25 million cap space, but that kind of brings us to the next thing. They do have some weird contracts, some big contracts. Alshon Jeffrey seemed to be a little pricey, ones like that, making the move to Deshaun Jackson. Even though Lane Johnson's a fantastic right tackle, one of the best football, deserves that amount of money, the layout of the contract is very strange. They paid Carson Wentz a lot of money. Maybe since they've already kind of put their, and you have to go out and make those moves, those risky moves to be great. They know that, but maybe there's a limit to what you do, how many times you do that. And they could have even more space if they had the flexibility to cut some of those guys that they want to cut. If they didn't do that, so that they can have a ridiculous amount of space to feel safe to get those big time players or more of those big time players. So that maybe. Since Clowney, like I mentioned a little earlier, it is pretty risky. It's even though you like him, I like him a lot. I think he's a fantastic football player. It's a little risky. So the Eagles definitely an option. And then what about the Colts? Like I said, right when free agency opened, I predicted the Titans. And I was kind of predicting the Titans for a while. Actually, before free agency opened, I was kind of leaning towards the Colts as an option. They made it clear they wanted to get better across the defensive line in free agency. They made it clear that they didn't spend big last year because they thought it was going to be overpay, a waste of money. They wanted to save it for this free agency. So they had all this leftover cap space. So they are trying to complete the defensive line. I think another team, with a proven Clowney, with a proven pass rusher, I think this team, I'm going to be a lot higher. Clowney makes everybody better. He makes them step up, but there's teams like this that I'm going to be much higher on if they get a guy like Clowney, just because what's around him, it's kind of that final piece. They have a good young defense. They had DeForest Buckner. Like I said, they wanted to spend the money on D-line and prove it. They did. DeForest Buckner on the inside. Do they have the guts? Do they have the balls to go out there and get better on the edge as well? You can get better. Add him with DeForest Buckner. We'll see what DeForest Buckner had around him. They have some other young pieces. They have Justin Houston, probably declining, can still play, not long-term solution. So let's see if they got it in them. I would like the Colts very much. If they got him, I wouldn't rule out. $24 million in cap space is a good number. Why maybe it won't happen? Maybe, Clowney, I think the Colts are better than the Browns, but he denied the Browns from a price that we probably expected him to accept because they weren't enough of a contender. The Colts, some view as a contender. I definitely think they're a playoff contender. Are they enough of a contender? Are they the Seahawks? Are they the Titans? Are they the Eagles? They might be just a little bit under them. Maybe they can compete with the Titans for that division, so maybe a little bit under the Seahawks. So maybe that's his thinking. It seems like the Colts are a little hesitant to spend big money in general, but on defense, They signed Phillip Rivers to a 1-year deal, pretty pricey. It still hasn't been determined who will be their future quarterback. They're still on the search for one kind of at the same time, and they're still open-minded to signing Rivers to another deal. If he does good, they're going to pay him a good amount of money for a 1-more-year deal, 2 maximum. So keeping kind of that insurance, that extra money for that. Defensively, yeah, they've been hesitant to spend big. They traded and spent big on DeForest Buckner, a proven defensive lineman, proven with the Niners, that is, but definitely a really good player. But is that enough for them? Or did they open that window up that they're ready to do so? We're going to find out with Clowney, maybe a guy like that. Or there's that, okay, we made our big move. It was tough to trade and to spend the big money, but we had to do it. Let's kind of close it there. Let's save this money. Because the question at quarterback, so that's kind of the question with them, and maybe why that wouldn't be my final pick. But an interesting one for sure. I would like the Colts, a lot more if, I would like all these teams a lot more. But the Colts are adding him with Justin Houston on the inside, DeForest Buckner. They got a couple young guys in there. Maybe they're just, I do feel like maybe they're just trusting their. If I draft guys, I believe in guys, I'm going to trust them a lot. I'm going to believe in their ability to get better, and you got to get some playing time to get better. But maybe they're just insisting on guys like Kamoko Ture, who I still think could be good. Ben Benogu, who they drafted last year, I think definitely could be good. Maybe they're just like, those are our guys. But everyone in the world knows you can get better with Clowney. If you believe you can win a Super Bowl, if you believe you can be a contender with Clowney, I think you go get him. I might be higher on Clowney than most of the world. I think most of the world looks at the sack numbers. And that doesn't really, and I think he gets enough pressure. I think he gets to the quarterback enough. I think it causes impact plays, impact moments in impact plays and impact moments. In big time situations, big time games, I think he shows up. In the day one he steps in, he was a dominant run defender. Does not have to prove to me at all that he can stop the run. I know you want more than that as a pass rusher, but I think he can do that. Keep in mind he was double teamed a ton, more than anybody last year, and actually was pretty productive against the double team. And that was with not much of pass rush help on the Seahawks on the other side, the other edge. So throw him in with a pretty good team with more pass rush. Who they going to double team? I still think he would get double teamed on some of these teams, but it doesn't change that he's a heck of a player. My prediction. I'm not one to change my pick, that easily. I've always trusted my judgment. I think it's worked out, even though I did say I did like the Colts before free agency opened. I like the Titans after, but I'm sticking with the Titans as my pick. Now, I have a couple situations here on why he could still be available. We talked about, and everyone knows that he wanted this big money, close to $20 million or around there, and he wanted a contender at the same time. Now, that doesn't come easy. That's very rare. So that's kind of why he stuck around at first. Now, I think couple options here. I think he could be wanting more. Now he's realizing that he's only going to get that money from the Browns, and the Browns could be a pretty good team. Keep in mind. But he's just thinking, maybe if I can't have both, I want more of the contender. And maybe he's waiting for that contender to give him something close to that. Maybe he's still negotiating. Him and his agent still negotiating with the team. Or maybe he's just waiting it out as long as he possibly can for the best possible contender with a decent amount of money to come up. That's a possibility. Another possibility, I felt strongly about the Titans. It made sense with Vrabel, the defense, the need, the money. It all made sense. He's been linked to him. It made big sense to me, a good amount of sense to me. And from what I was hearing, on top of all, just using the knowledge, what makes sense, it just worked, and that's why it was my prediction. And I felt like it was going to happen by this point. I felt like it was definitely going to happen. You look at that compensatory deadline, where the week after the draft, where if you sign a guy, it doesn't cancel out your losses in free agencies. It doesn't count towards the compensatory selection process. I really thought the Titans were going to do it at that point. The NFL cracking down, and they said they're going to, if it's obvious that teams did that for a reason to avoid maybe losing a compensatory pick for the next draft, they will penalize that team, which, by the way, it's besides the point. But by the way, I think it's complete BS, because they made the rule that teams can sign guys at that point still. It doesn't count towards the compensatory. So what are they going to do? It's an unwritten. They're trying to create an unwritten rule. So that's complete BS. But the Titans, Clowney, could have made a gentleman's agreement at this point, and they kind of want to wait just to make sure They're safe. Everything can happen, and that's maybe why he's denying the Browns, because he's already fell in love with the idea of being on the Titans. He already made a gentleman's agreement that it would be okay if he backed out. I think they would be mad at each other, but it's possible. That could be an option as well. He basically could be maybe not just a Tennessee Titan. Maybe he could be. It's another team. It could be, but he basically could be a Tennessee Titan. Is my point at this point. We just got it. We just kind of wait for the time. That being right, or teams could be worried about the injury concern, not want to pay him that much money. So there's a lot of things in factor, but I thought those are pretty interesting. That maybe they already kind of made a gentleman's agreement and they're kind of waiting on the right point. I'm sticking to my pick. Yeah, there's probably other wild card teams. The Browns were a wild card team for me before, but apparently he denied that offer. I would be very curious to see what the offer is. Would have said the Bills, but they added a lot of pass rushers, but they can get better with Clowney, and that makes them that much better. They're like a Clowney away from being legit, maybe the best defense in football, which they already can be, but you can be almost a sure thing. So teams like that have cap space too. But very interesting. I'm still picking the Titans, but it's getting pretty interesting, especially the Seahawks making those cuts. They kind of come back into play, and I think some people are kind of leaning towards the Seahawks. Let me know your guys' thoughts. If you have other teams, we can definitely talk about them on Twitter, the comments. If you want to tweet at me, that's probably the fastest way to get in touch with me. Again, a bunch of polls on the Twitter for you guys creating playoff videos, and more of that coming. Future videos as well. We'll do polls. So that Twitter's a must follow. Please subscribe to both of our channels. That is going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.